Congratulations on your promotion. Now you're paying for grandma's nursing home, my rent, and my kids' school, Mom announced at Sunday dinner. Everyone nodded. I said, sure. Pulled out my phone, updated every auto payment in my name. $14,700 a month, gone in 4 minutes. By Monday morning, Dad's car was the moment I need to tell you about. Happened on a Sunday in March of 2024 at exactly 3:47 in the afternoon at my mother's dining room table in Paramus, New Jersey, surrounded by a pot roast nobody had touched. A centerpiece that had been purchased at a Tuesday morning clearance sale and never updated since 2011. And the warm, loving gaze of a family that had just collectively decided that my promotion to senior accountant at Whitmore and Associates was in fact the best thing that had ever happened to all of them personally. My name is Herbert Crane. I am 34 years old. I am a certified public accountant. And for reasons I will explain in a moment. I was seated at that table wearing a clip-on tie my mother had bought me for Christmas of 2009 because she had told me 4 separate times over the previous 6 days that the dinner was a real occasion. I had put on the clip-on tie. I had driven 41 minutes from my apartment in Hoboken. I had brought a $12 bottle of Pinot Grigio that my brother-in-law, Derek Fontaine, aged 41, who had not held a job since the Nissan dealership let him go in 2021, described as a little flat before finishing 3/4 of it himself. I was prepared for many things that evening. What I was not prepared for was the announcement, but I am getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you what my mother said, I need you to understand something about the Crane family of Paramus, New Jersey. I need you to understand, specifically, what kind of family raises a boy named Herbert and then seems genuinely surprised when he grows up to become an accountant. My father, Ronald Crane, is 61 years old. He spent 32 years working as a maintenance supervisor for the Bergen County School District and retired in 2022 with a pension, a plaque, and a deeply held belief that he had personally built every public school in the state of New Jersey with his own hands, which is not quite accurate, but which nobody in the family has ever challenged, because the man has opinions about load-bearing walls that can sustain a full dinner's worth of conversation without any assistance. My mother, Patricia Crane, is 58 years old. She worked part-time as a receptionist at a dermatologist's office until 2016. At which point she retired to focus on what she described as managing the household, which appeared from the outside to consist primarily of watching true crime documentaries, organizing a Facebook group for Paramus residents concerned about local deer population, and sending me articles with subject lines like, "Have you considered the banking sector?" I had not considered the banking sector. I was already an accountant. The distinction was apparently lost. My sister, Donna Crane Fontaine, is 37 years old. She married Derek Fontaine in 2013 at a ceremony that cost $42,000, of which my parents paid $31,000 and Derek's family paid $0, because Derek's mother, Cheryl Fontaine, had explained that she was in a transitional period, a phrase that Derek himself would go on to use professionally for the next 11 years. Donna and Derek have 2 children. Mason, aged 9, who attends a private school in Ridgewood that costs $22,000 a year, and Kaylee, aged 7, who attends the same private school at the same rate. Donna does not work. Donna describes herself on social media as a family wellness architect, which is not a job, but which has 1,400 followers on Instagram, several of whom appear to be real people. And then there is Grandma Edna. Edna Crane is 83 years old. She is my father's mother. She is sharp, mean, funny, and fully capable of operating her own television remote, which I mention because her eventual placement in a memory care facility called Sunrise Gardens in Hackensack, which costs $9,400 a month, will become relevant to this story in approximately 2 paragraphs. Now, back to the dining room. Back to 3:47 in the afternoon. Back to the pot roast and the flat Pinot Grigio and the clip-on tie. My promotion at Whitmore and Associates had come through on a Friday. Senior accountant. Base salary increase from $78,000 to $112,000 a year. I had called my parents that evening, not because I needed their approval, but because I am a human being with a mother, and it seemed like the kind of thing you tell your mother. This was, in retrospect, the first of several strategic errors I made that week. My mother had been thrilled, genuinely, warmly, effusively thrilled. She had immediately organized a Sunday dinner. She had made a pot roast. She had called Donna. She had apparently also called Donna's husband, Derek, who had arrived 40 minutes late with a six-pack of Miller Lite and a look on his face that I can only describe as the expression of a man who has just learned there is a buffet in the next room and he has not eaten since Tuesday. I sat down. I said thank you for the dinner. I accepted the clip-on tie compliment from my mother with the grace of a man who has long since accepted his circumstances. I poured myself a glass of the Pinot Grigio before Derek could finish it. I was feeling, honestly, pretty good. I had worked hard. I had earned something. I was 34 years old, and for the first time in my adult life, I was going to be able to save money with real conviction instead of the kind of optimistic fiction I had been practicing on spreadsheets since I was 28. Then my mother set down her fork, straightened her spine in the way she does when she is about to make a speech, and looked at me with the warm, proud smile of a woman who has just solved a very complicated logistical problem. "Herbert," she said, "we are so proud of you. And because we are family, and family takes care of each other, I just want to get ahead of a few things while we are all together." I nodded. I sipped my wine. I was still feeling fine. "Sunrise Gardens sent another bill," she said, "for Grandma. The $9,400 a month. Your father and I have been stretching, Herbert. We have really been stretching. And now that you have this new salary, I think it makes the most sense for you to take over the payments. You are the one with the financial education after all." I looked at my father. My father was studying the centerpiece with the concentration of a man who has made a unilateral decision to be somewhere else mentally. "Also," my mother continued, because she had clearly prepared talking points and was not finished, "Donna and Derek are in a difficult moment. The rent on their place in Ridgewood is $3,100 a month. If you could just help cover that, even temporarily, it would really stabilize the family." Donna looked at me with an expression I can only describe as apologetic, except that the apology was entirely theoretical, and she made no move to speak. Derek looked at me with the expression of a man who has no expression because he has processed no part of this conversation. "And the kids' school," my mother said. "Mason and Kaylee. You know how important their education is. The tuition is $22,000 a year each. That is $44,000 total. Broken into monthly payments, that is $3,666.66 a month, which is very manageable. I did the math. Instantly. Automatically. Because I am a certified public accountant, and my brain does not have a setting where it does not do the math. 9,400 plus 3,100 plus $3,666.66. That is $16,166.66 a month. My new salary, before taxes, was $9,333.33 a month. Everyone at the table was nodding. My father was nodding at the centerpiece. Donna was nodding at her wine. Derek was nodding because I believe he had been awoken by the sound of his own name and was attempting to appear engaged. My mother looked at me with the serene confidence of a woman who has presented a reasonable proposal and is awaiting enthusiastic agreement. I said, "Sure." I pulled out my phone. My mother smiled. She thought I was going to open a calculator, perhaps make notes, perhaps ask clarifying questions about payment schedules. This is what she expected from a person with a financial education. Reasonable, organized discussion. What I opened was my banking app. For the next 4 minutes, while the pot roast cooled and Derek poured himself another Miller Lite, and my father continued his meditation on the centerpiece, I did the following. I canceled the automatic payment for my mother's Netflix account, which had been in my name since 2019. I canceled the automatic payment for my parents' Hulu account, also in my name, which had been added in 2021 when my mother discovered a documentary series about unsolved New Jersey murders and needed premium access. I canceled the automatic payment for my parents' Amazon Prime membership, which had been in my name since 2017, and which had been used primarily to send items to my parents' address because, as my mother had explained at the time, you get such good deals. I canceled the automatic payment for the cell phone plan that covered both my parents' lines, which I had added to my own account in 2020 because my mother's plan had expired and my father had described the process of setting up a new one as not something I have time for right now, and which had continued to not be something he had time for 4 consecutive years. I canceled the automatic transfer of $200 a month to my parents' joint checking account, which had begun during the pandemic as temporary support and which had quietly never been discussed or stopped. I removed my parents' home address from my Amazon account. I updated the emergency contact on my Costco membership from my mother's phone number to my own. I sent one text message to my building's management office. It read, "Please remove my parents from the authorized visitor list for the parking garage. Thank you." I had added them in 2022 when my mother wanted to visit without calling ahead. She had used this access twice, both times to drop off leftovers I had not requested. And then I put my phone in my pocket, picked up my fork, and ate a very respectable portion of the pot roast, which was, I will give credit where it is due, quite good. My mother was still smiling. She had not yet noticed anything had happened. "So you will set up the payments this week?" she asked. "I'll handle everything Monday," I said. This was technically accurate. Monday morning, I arrived at the office at 8:15 and spent 37 minutes completing what I had started at the dinner table. I am going to walk you through the full accounting because I am, professionally, an accountant, and precision is how I experience love for myself. Total monthly expenditure I had been covering for the Crane family of Paramus, New Jersey, prior to my promotion announcement, $14,782.66. This included the 2 items I just described. It also included several things my family had apparently forgotten I was paying, because I had set them up quietly and efficiently, as accountants tend to do, and had never mentioned them because I had not understood at the time that invisibility was not a strategy, it was a trap. I had been paying for my parents' home internet service since 2018, when the previous provider raised rates and my mother had called me in distress, and I had set up a new account in my name because it was faster than explaining how to do it herself. $64.99 a month. I had been paying for the extended warranty on my father's 2019 Toyota Camry, which he had purchased with a loan I had co-signed, and which I had also been making payments on since 2021. When my father had described the payment amount as more than I was expecting, and somehow this had become a matter I managed. $412 a month, with 14 months remaining. I had been paying for a storage unit in Munich, New Jersey, where my parents kept items they described as too important to throw away, which upon my single inspection of the unit in 2022 had included a broken elliptical machine, 12 boxes of Reader's Digest from the 1990s, 3 artificial Christmas trees of varying heights, and a bag of golf clubs belonging to a man named Phil, who had apparently loaned them to my father at some point in the early 2000s, and whose last name nobody in the family could remember. $89 a month I had been paying for my sister Donna's gym membership at a Planet Fitness in Ridgewood. $24.99 a month. Donna had not been to this gym since 2022. According to Donna herself, who had mentioned this casually at Thanksgiving of 2023, while explaining that she was in a different wellness phase right now. I had been paying for Mason's after-school coding program, $140 a month, which Donna had signed him up for in September of 2023 after forwarding me a link to the registration page with the message, "Isn't this great? He loves computers." I had clicked the link, looked at the price, sighed in a way that is only audible to myself, and registered him. I had been paying for Kaylee's ballet lessons, $80 a month. No explanation had been given. A Venmo request had arrived in June of 2023 from Donna with a note, "Kaylee Ballet." I had paid it. It had arrived every month since. I had been co-signing the lease on Donna and Derek's apartment in Ridgewood, which meant that my credit was legally entangled with Derek Fontaine's continued existence as a tenant, which is a sentence I had spent 22 months trying not to think about on a daily basis. By 8:52 on Monday morning, I had surgically removed myself from every single one of these arrangements. I had called the storage unit and given notice. I had called the car warranty company and updated the billing contact to my father's information. I had called the internet provider and transferred the account. I had emailed the Planet Fitness membership services with Donna's email address and requested the transfer. I had emailed the coding program. I had emailed the ballet studio. I had called the property management company for Donna and Derek's building and informed them that I would not be renewing my co-signer agreement at the end of the lease cycle in May. Then I made a cup of coffee from the office machine, which makes a very mediocre cup of coffee, and I drank it with the quiet satisfaction of a man who has just reclaimed $14,782.66 of his own monthly income. My phone rang at 9:17. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again at 9:23. I let it go to voicemail at 9:31. A text message arrived. It read, "Herbert, the Netflix is not working." I replied, "I canceled that account. You might want to set up your own." Silence. 38 minutes of silence, which, if you know my mother, is approximately the same as 38 minutes of very loud screaming, compressed and stored for later use. At 10:09, my father called. I answered my father's calls because my father is a man who calls perhaps 4 times a year, and the calls are always either logistical or weather-related, and I wanted to know which category this was. "Your mother says the Netflix isn't working," my father said. "I know," I said. "I canceled it." "Why'd you do that?" "I canceled a number of things this morning, Dad. You'll be getting some emails." A long pause. "The car payment?" "That one too. The billing information has been updated to your address." Another pause. I heard my father breathe out very slowly, the way he breathes when he is calculating whether a conversation is worth having. This is a quality I inherited from him and for which I am genuinely grateful every single day. "You talked to your mother about this?" he asked. "Mom talked to me about a lot of things at dinner yesterday," I said. "I've been thinking it over." "Uh-huh," he said. "How is the pot roast?" I asked. "Good," he said. "She made too much. She always makes too much." "Yeah," he said. Then he said, "You know this is going to be a whole thing." "I know," I said. "I have a meeting at 11. I have to go." "All right," he said. "You all right?" "I'm great, Dad. Genuinely great." "Okay," he said. And then, because my father is a man of tremendous economy, fair enough. He hung up. I finished my mediocre coffee. My 11 o'clock meeting was about a client's quarterly reconciliation, and I conducted it with what my colleague Sandra Marsh, aged 43, senior partner, who has known me for 6 years and once described my facial expressions as suggesting the presence of feelings without actually committing to any. Later described as an unusual amount of visible good humor for a Monday. My mother did not call me again that day. This was, I knew, not the end of anything. This was the beginning of the siege. The siege began in earnest on Wednesday when my Aunt Lorraine, my mother's sister, aged 55, who lives in Wayne, New Jersey, and who I have spoken to perhaps 11 times in my adult life, called me to let me know that she had heard from my mother that I was going through something, and that family was important, and that she hoped I would reflect on my values. I thanked Aunt Lorraine for her concern and asked how her daughter Melissa was doing, which redirected the conversation for 22 minutes before she remembered she was calling to deliver a message, and not to discuss Melissa's ongoing dispute with her homeowners association. On Thursday, Donna called. This was remarkable because Donna and I had spoken by phone perhaps twice in the preceding calendar year, our communication having long since migrated entirely to occasional Instagram likes and the previously mentioned Venmo requests. "Herbert," she said, "I'm not going to make this weird." "Okay," I said, "but Mason's coding program sent an email saying the billing contact was changing, and I don't know how to set that up." "There's a link in the email," I said. "You just click it and enter a new card." "Okay, but whose card?" "Yours," I said. "Or Derek's." A pause. "Derek doesn't have a card right now," she said. He's in a transitional period. I know, I said. I've been aware of Derek's transitional period since approximately 2021. He may want to consider transitioning into a period that includes a debit card. Silence. That's a little harsh, she said. Donna, I said, because she is my sister and I do love her. In the complicated, exhausted way you love someone who has been using your credit as a personal flotation device for 3 years. I'm not trying to be harsh. I'm trying to be clear. I've been covering a lot of things for a long time. I'm going to stop covering those things. That's not a crisis. That's just arithmetic. Mom thinks you're having a breakdown, Donna said. Mom thinks anything I do that she didn't pre-approve is a breakdown, I said. I am not having a breakdown. I am having a very financially healthy spring. Another pause. The ballet is $60 next month, she said, because of the recital costume. Great, I said. Kaylee's going to look wonderful. I look forward to seeing pictures. I did not pay for the recital costume. I know because I checked my Venmo. No request arrived. Somewhere, I choose to believe Donna paid for the costume herself and found it was not actually that complicated. And Kaylee looked wonderful, and none of this turned out to require my bank account at all. But I am not at the resolution yet. The resolution required one more scene, and this one involved my father's car. And it is the scene that I think about most often when I need to remember that accounting, done with sufficient precision, is occasionally a form of poetry. It was the following Sunday, exactly 1 week after the dinner. I was in my apartment in Hoboken, doing what I do on Sunday mornings, which is make a good cup of coffee using an actual espresso machine I bought myself in January of 2024. As a deliberate act of self-regard, read the financial press and exist in approximately 800 square feet of space that belongs entirely to me and contains 0 artificial Christmas trees and 0 boxes of Reader's Digest. My phone rang. It was my father. The car, he said. Yes, I said. The warranty company called. I figured they would, I said. They need a new billing card. Right, he said. But also, he paused. Also, Herbert, I looked at the payment history. Okay, I said. You've been paying this since 2021. I have, I said. How much? $412 a month, I said. For 38 months. A very long pause. That's, he started, then stopped. $15,656, I said. Give or take. My father is not a man who is easily silenced. He has opinions about load-bearing walls. He once argued with a home improvement store employee for 26 minutes about the correct grade of sandpaper for refinishing a deck. He is not a man who runs out of things to say. He was quiet for 11 seconds. I counted. I didn't know you were doing that, he said. I know, I said. Your mother organized it. I know. She said you offered. I know that too, I said. My father exhaled. A long, slow, structural sound, like a building settling. I'll set up the payment this week, he said, for the warranty. There's also the storage unit in Munich, I said pleasantly. That notice goes into effect at the end of the month. You'll want to decide what to do about Phil's golf clubs. For the love of, he said quietly to himself. And the internet is in Mom's name now. She might need to sit on hold for a bit. It's usually about 15 minutes, but if she calls in the morning, she can avoid the wait. Herbert. Yes. Are you enjoying this? I thought about it honestly, the way I think about all figures I want to report accurately. A little bit, I said. Not cruelly, but a little bit. My father made a sound I had never quite heard from him before. It took me a moment to identify it. It was a laugh. Not a big one. Not the kind of laugh that fills a room. The kind of laugh that escapes a man when something has been said that is so precisely true that his body responds before his dignity can stop it. Fair enough, he said. That phrase, again, his phrase, the one he uses when the math is correct and there is nothing left to argue. We talked for another 6 minutes about nothing in particular. The weather. The deck he was planning to refinish. The correct grade of sandpaper, which I allowed him to explain again. Because some things you give people, not because they need it, but because it costs you nothing, and it is a kindness. It is now June of 2024, 3 months after the dinner. I want to tell you what things look like now. My bank account, for the first time in my adult life, is growing at a rate that does not make me feel like I am bailing out a boat with a teacup. I have set up an actual investment portfolio with an actual financial goal, which is perhaps ironic for an accountant, except that people who work in restaurants often forget to eat dinner, and people who are accountants for other people's money sometimes fail to account for their own. My parents set up their own Netflix account. It took 3 phone calls to customer service and 1 call to me, which I answered cheerfully. And I walked my mother through the process with the patience of a man who has decided that patience, when it costs him nothing, is a reasonable gift. She now has her own account. She has watched 4 documentaries about New Jersey murders in 3 weeks. She seems genuinely content. Derek Fontaine got a job. I do not want to oversell this. He is working part-time at a Honda dealership in Paramus, not the Nissan one, the Honda one, and his hours are described by Donna as still settling. But he has a debit card. I know because Donna mentioned it in a way that suggested she expected me to be surprised, and I was, slightly but pleasantly so. Mason's coding program sent him an email about a summer intensive. Donna paid for it. She called me to mention this with the specific energy of someone who is not asking for a compliment, but would not mind receiving one. I told her Mason was going to be a great programmer. She said he mostly wanted to make video games. I said that was a perfectly reasonable thing to want. Grandma Edna is still at Sunrise Gardens. The $9,400 a month is a real problem. My parents are working it out with a combination of the pension, some savings, and a law. Productive conversation with a social worker at the facility who helped them understand Edna's eligibility for certain programs that my mother had not known existed because she had previously outsourced the research portion of all financial. Problems to me. I went to visit Grandma Edna in April. She is sharp and mean and funny. She asked me if I had a girlfriend. I said, not currently. She said I should get one. I said I was working on the foundational infrastructure first. She said that was the most accountant thing she had ever heard. She is 83 years old, and she is correct. There is one moment from the past 3 months that I keep returning to. I do not know entirely why. It is small. I was in my apartment on a Tuesday night in May, working through some quarterly reports for a client, and I realized I was hungry. I walked to my kitchen and I made myself a sandwich. A specific sandwich. Sourdough, sharp cheddar, turkey, a little Dijon mustard, some arugula. I sat at my own table in my own kitchen and I ate my sandwich and I looked out my window at the Hudson River and I thought, this is mine. The food, the apartment, the view, the evening, the silence. Mine. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way that required anyone else to understand or validate. Just mine. The quiet arithmetic of a life that adds up to itself. I am a 34-year-old accountant. I am not a wealthy man. I am not a powerful man. I am not, by most measures, a remarkable one. I went to Rutgers University on a partial scholarship, and I worked 23 hours a week at a library to cover the rest. I got my CPA certification on my second attempt, which I mention specifically because I think there is more dignity in the second attempt than in the first. Because the second attempt means you failed and you came back anyway. I have driven the same car, a 2016 Honda Civic, with 114,000 miles on it for 4 years. I own one good suit. I make my own coffee. What I am, and what it took me longer than it should have to understand, is a person who is very good at understanding what things cost. Not just in money, in time, in attention. In the slow, invisible accumulation of obligations that nobody names, and nobody discusses, and nobody cancels until the person carrying them finally sits at a Sunday dinner table with a clip-on tie and does the math out loud. The thing about being an accountant, the thing nobody tells you when you are deciding to be one, is that the skill is not really about numbers. Numbers are just a language. The skill is about clarity. The ability to look at a situation and see it exactly as it is, without the distortion of sentiment or hope, or the specific New Jersey version of family loyalty that involves someone else paying for your storage unit in Munich. I was not angry at my family. I want to be clear about that. Anger requires a kind of surprise that I was not in a position to feel, because I had been watching this particular ledger accumulate for years and had simply never closed it. That was on me. The solution was not to be angry. The solution was to be an accountant, to review the books, to identify the liabilities, to make the corrections, to update the auto payments. 4 minutes, I mentioned at the beginning. 4 minutes to change the shape of my financial life. But honestly, I had been preparing for those 4 minutes for a decade. Every time I said yes, when I should have said clarify. Every time I absorbed a Venmo request without asking why this was my responsibility. Every time I set something up in my name because it was easier than explaining, I was doing the work. I was just doing it for the wrong balance sheet. Now, I want to ask you something. When is the last time you actually looked at what you have been quietly paying for? Not just the bank statements, not just the subscriptions. I mean the real payments. The invisible ones, the ones you made in time, in availability, in showing up again after someone assumed you would. Do you know the total? And here is the deeper one. How long have you been waiting for someone to notice what you carry before you give yourself permission to put it down? And this last one is the one I think about most. Sitting at my table with my sandwich and my view of the Hudson River. What would you do with $14,782.66 a month if it were actually yours? Not the money specifically. I mean the equivalent. The attention, the energy, the time, the weight you have been carrying for people who never looked up the account balance. What would you build with it if you decided to build something for yourself?